It is a sad time right now to be a Need for Speed fan, even a racing game fan, because Need for Speed is officially done. So before we get into what I think is basically confirmation of the end of Need for Speed, I think we need to go through the timeline of events that has led to this point. So I want you to cast your mind back to late 2024, early 2025. So Volume 9 dropped in at the end of November 2024. And a couple months later, we got an end of volume report for Volume 9. And then not too long after that, we got an end of Kaizen review. And in that end of Kaizen review, we basically got confirmation that there would no longer be any live service updates for Need for Speed Unbound, because the development team that were working on the Kaizen updates, Volume 6, 7, 8, and 9, they would be moved over to work on the new Battlefield game, which turned out to be Battlefield 6. So after this point, Need for Speed was basically shelved so that they could go all hands on deck for the new Battlefield game, which was due to come out later that year. Now, not too long after the end of Kaizen review dropped, we also got an article, and in that article EA said a few things, and they touched on Need for Speed as well, and there was a very interesting quote in the article. And what is also very interesting and is a very important point to this timeline is who said the quote. So there was a point in the article where EA said, while it's the end of the road for Unbound, EA confirmed that Need for Speed will return at some point. And they said, and I'll quote who said this: with an increased understanding of what our players want in a Need for Speed experience, we plan to bring the franchise back in new and interesting ways. Now, the important thing is who said this. Who said this was Vince Zampella, and I will touch on why that is important in a little bit. But yeah, the person who said that Need for Speed will be back in new interesting ways was Vince Zampella. Now, who was Vince Zampella? Well, Vince Zampella was basically, he was the head of operations of the EA Studios, and also he was the person who was in charge of Need for Speed. Basically, he oversaw the Need for Speed franchise, and him saying that Need for Speed will be back in new and interesting ways is very important, and I will get into why that is so important very shortly. Now we're going to fast forward to the 21st of December 2025. Tragically, Vince Zampella was involved in a car crash and it was fatal. Vince Zampella lost his life. And before we go any further, I just want to say, rest in peace, Vince Zampella. Condolences to all your friends, your family, your loved ones, because it's never easy losing someone like that. Now, you've got to remember that Vince Zampella was the one who was in charge of Need for Speed. He oversaw everything to do with Need for Speed, and he was the one that was quoted saying that Need for Speed will be back in new and interesting ways. He was obviously a car guy, and he cared about the Need for Speed franchise. He was a fan himself, and with his tragic death, it's pretty clear that no one took his place. Now I want to fast forward again to March of this year, 2026, and EA, for whatever reason, they laid off some staff that were part of the team working on Battlefield from multiple studios, including Criterion, DICE, Ripple Effect, and Motive Studios. Now, obviously, if you remember, Criterion are the people that worked on Unbound, right? So they worked on Need for Speed, and they've worked on Need for Speed several times in the past. There's several Need for Speed Criterion games, and EA just laid off some staff from those studios, which to me that is confusing, because Battlefield 6 had such a massive launch, and they said that they want to continue the live service across the Battlefield studios, yet they've laid off staff. That doesn't really make sense to me. But anyway, we are kind of here to talk about Need for Speed, and obviously with staff being laid off at so many studios, including Criterion, it kind of paints a picture, doesn't it? They don't really see Need for Speed as a priority. They don't. They just don't. Which is a shame. But this is just one of the moves in the timeline amongst several other things that I think have led to why we are not getting a new Need for Speed. Okay, now let's move on to why I am pretty certain, like I would say maybe with 90% certainty, that this has confirmed to me that Need for Speed is no longer. So it was the 30th anniversary of Criterion the other day. I think it was the 7th of July. And a representative from IGN asked the Vice President and GM of Battlefield Studios Europe, Rebecca Kutath, and this representative asked about Need for Speed and Burnout developments. And this is what Rebecca Kutath had to say. She said, "We are not here to talk about the past." That says it all, doesn't it? Because you really have to think, right? Need for Speed and Burnout are such a huge part of Criterion's legacy, of their history, of their heritage. And this is their 30th year anniversary, and she is not even willing to acknowledge any of those games when they're such a big part of why Criterion is where it's at today. To me, that is like 95% confirmation that Need for Speed is done. It's done. Like, it's not even in their minds anymore. She even said that when he asked about Need for Speed and Burnout, she even said, "We are solely focused on Battlefield." Now, I get it, right? Battlefield has just come out last year, and it was their biggest launch. But to not even acknowledge anything of Need for Speed or Burnout when they are such a huge part of your history, that says it all, really, doesn't it? That says everything. Now, I'm going to get onto the last thing, because if any of that didn't convince you that Need for Speed was done, this surely will. So, Need for Speed Mobile was currently, it's only available in Asia, but Need for Speed Mobile was supposed to get a global release, right? And they had separate social media pages specifically for Need for Speed Mobile. Well, guess what? They are all gone. It's as if they never existed. You used to be able to go onto Google and search Need for Speed Mobile socials, and they had a link tree that had all their social media pages, including Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. All of that now is gone. It's gone. It's like they never existed. So clearly the global release is no longer going ahead. It's as if they want nothing to do with Need for Speed anymore. Absolutely nothing. So yeah, man, this is really, really sad. Honestly, as a racing game fan, as a Need for Speed fan, this is really sad news. I've been playing Need for Speed since Underground 1 days, and I'm still now playing Need for Speed Unbound. I flipping love Need for Speed. It's honestly one of my favourite games to play of all time. I love racing games, and this is just really sad news to me, man. And it should be for anyone that loves not just Need for Speed but racing games, because we are losing such an iconic franchise. We're losing such an iconic franchise, and now we're left with what? We're left with Forza. No disrespect to Forza, but I'm sorry, it isn't laying a glove on Need for Speed. In my opinion, for me, Forza's not doing it. I will continue to play Need for Speed until I can no longer, because no other racing game hits the spot for me. No other racing game can scratch the itch that Need for Speed scratches. You know, the level of customization that you can do to your car is just insane. You know, the personalization, the fact that you can actually do so much to your car to make that car your own. It's on another level. There's no other game that is out right now that is touching the levels of customization and personalization that you can do to your car that the same way that Need for Speed does it. The arcadey handling, I love the arcade. I've always been more of an arcade person than a sim or simcade. Always, I will always love arcade racing games. I will always have time for arcade racing games. And losing Need for Speed, it breaks my heart, man. Honestly, breaks my heart. Now, do I really think that Need for Speed is done? Do I really think this is the end for Need for Speed? Unfortunately, yes. I genuinely think that EA do not want anything to do with Need for Speed anymore. They're completely done with it. And unless Need for Speed gets picked up by another studio, I don't think we're seeing a new Need for Speed game anytime soon. So that's it. End of an era. It's pretty tragic, isn't it? We had a good run though, right? We had an amazing run. But you know what they say? All good things must come to an end. That's it. That is it. No more Need for Speed. I can't believe it. I can't believe it. This is really sad. This is genuinely upsetting because I've played Need for Speed all my life. It's been my favorite racing game all my life. And now, there ain't gonna be another one. But you know what? At least we went out with a bang, right? At least we went out with a bang. Because Unbound is unbelievable. Unbound is such a good game. It's a great game. I know we got off to a rocky start, but it is now undeniably a top 3 Need for Speed. So you know what? We went out with a bang, man. So thank you Need for Speed for giving us so many great games. Let me know in the comments how you feel about this news that there's not going to be any more Need for Speeds. Are you sad? You know, are you happy that there's going to be no more Need for Speeds because maybe Unbound left a bad taste in your mouth, so you're kind of like, okay, well, at least there's going to be no more of that. And also as well, let me know what other games are you playing to replace Need for Speed, or are you going to continue to play Need for Speed? Because I know I am, but if you're not, let me know what other games you're moving to. And yeah, that's it, man. Hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.